Good evening, everybody. Welcome to 3GNY Stories Live, WEDU Wednesday. Thank you for joining us tonight, and happy Passover, happy Easter to those who celebrate. I'm Dave Reckes, 3GNY's new executive director and the grandchild of two Holocaust survivors. I'm thrilled to be here for our 17th WEDU Wednesday. Tonight, we'll be featuring guest speaker Dana Arschin, who has a fascinating story to share. We welcome all of you who are tuning in for the first time, as well as those of you who regularly participate in our programs. We are grateful for our community. As I celebrated Passover this weekend, we built time in our Seder, as we do every year, to tell stories about my grandparents and their experiences surviving the Holocaust. It reminded me of the importance of storytelling in our Jewish tradition, especially at Passover. Our stories connect us to our ancestors from long ago and from recent history, and help us build empathy for all people suffering oppression and discrimination, even today. As we read in the Haggadah, in every generation, it is our duty to consider ourselves as if we had come forth from Egypt. As we listen to Dana's story, let us reflect on our own freedoms today and our shared responsibility to help others find freedom. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you and hearing your stories and your thoughts about 3GNY. If you have ideas, feedback, or general questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to hear from you. My email address is in the chat. 3GNY is an educational nonprofit for grandchildren of survivors and our supporters. As a living link, we preserve the legacies and the lessons of the Holocaust. Our mission is to educate diverse communities about the perils of intolerance and to provide a supportive forum for the descendants of survivors. Founded in 2005 with a group of 6, 3GNY's membership is now at 4,500 and continues to grow. Over these past 15 years, we've held diverse programs of all sizes around the New York area. 3GNY has also played a leading role in launching other 3G groups, including 3G DC, 3G New Jersey, and 3G Philly. And we're in conversation with still others around the country to expand our reach even more. Tonight's WEDU Wednesday program showcases 3GNY's flagship educational initiative, WEDU, which is short for We Educate. I'm now going to hand it over to WEDU volunteer Allison Berg, who will talk more about the program.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Allison Berg, the grandchild of 2 Holocaust survivors, and I regularly share my grandmother's story in schools. I also had the privilege to tell it at a previous WEDU Wednesday back in January. WEDU is a 4-week training program that empowers grandchildren of survivors to compile and compellingly share their family's Holocaust experiences in school classrooms and with community groups. We've all seen the heartbreaking studies stating the lack of Holocaust knowledge among recent high school and college graduates. The good news is students who do receive Holocaust education are more tolerant and comfortable with people of different races and backgrounds. They're more willing to challenge incorrect or biased information and are more likely to be upstanders. Through our grandparents' testimony, we talk about the importance of stepping in early and often where small injustices are found, on the playground, in the classroom, and on the street, because it is the easiest and most efficient way to act. By the time the Nazi tanks roll in, it's too late. 3GNY has trained over 300 speakers in New York, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., and most recently around the country on Zoom since the pandemic hit. In 2020 alone, we trained 62 grandchildren, more speakers than any other year. Also in 2020, between speaking in schools, our live programming, and our YouTube channel, more than 10,000 people have heard our stories. And in total, throughout WEDU's existence, more than 30,000 students have been impacted. Hope is not lost, but we need to keep doing the work. You can help us accomplish this through a financial gift of any amount. This will go directly towards training more speakers and therefore reaching more students. We do not solicit donations from schools, teachers, or students. We provide our programming to schools completely free, and we aim to keep the cost of training to 3Gs as low as possible. There's a link with ways to donate in the chat, and we hope you'll consider making a gift. If you've already donated to us, thank you so much. And to everyone, just by being here tonight, you're helping us honor the memories of our grandparents and ensuring that never again is more than an empty phrase. I'm excited to introduce you to tonight's speaker, Dana Arschin. Dana is a two-time Emmy Award-winning reporter who joined the Fox 5 News team in August 2016. She previously worked as a general assignment reporter for News 12, The Bronx and Brooklyn, where she shot, wrote, and edited all of her own stories. During her tenure at News 12, Dana won a New York Emmy Award for reporting on the city's cleanup efforts in Brooklyn during the 2014 snowstorms. She also won first place 2 years in a row at the New York Press Club Awards for her reporting in Brooklyn. In 2018, Dana traveled to Poland to learn more about her ancestors murdered in the Holocaust. She shot, wrote, and produced 3 short films on her journey for Fox 5. Dana won her second New York Emmy Award for one of those films, entitled The Forgotten Camps. Dana grew up on Long Island, where she discovered her passion for journalism at a young age. She made her broadcasting debut in the 5th grade, reporting to her elementary school's first ever news station, Jackson Broadcasting Kids. Dana graduated cum laude from University of Delaware with a double major in Spanish Studies and Communication. She also received a master's degree with honors in broadcast journalism from the New York Institute of Technology. She's fluent in Spanish, conversant in Portuguese, and a beginner in Mandarin. During her free time, you can find Dana teaching flying trapeze classes, at one point at the same sleepaway camp that I went to, playing on New York City sports leagues, eating at new restaurants, and planning her next travel adventure. She's also the proud granddaughter of an Auschwitz concentration camp survivor and goes into classrooms to tell her grandfather's story. She lives in Long Island with her husband and daughter. Dana, please take it away.
Allison, thank you so much for those incredibly kind words and for having me speak here tonight. Another big thanks to David Reckes, who you just heard from, as well as Gail Pack, Farah Kraus, and David Wax with 3GNY. And of course, I am so grateful to every single one of you joining in tonight. I know what a crazy time this is for all of us, and I know how busy your schedules must be. It truly means so much to me. I'm incredibly humbled and honored to have this opportunity. All right, so bear with me. I'm going to try to share my screen and make sure this works for all of you as I pull up my presentation. Here we go. That working for everyone? Thumbs up from the panelists? Great. So first, a little bit about me and my connection to 3GNY. I joined the organization in 2013, and I've always had a fascination with the Holocaust, wanting to constantly learn more and better understand what my ancestors and millions of European Jews, as well as millions of other victims, endured during one of the darkest times in our history. In 2013, I took the WEDU class with 3GNY, which Allison just told you all about. That class forced me to learn as much as possible about my family's history. After completing that course, I went into classrooms to present my Poppy's story. And my Poppy, my grandpa, my maternal grandpa, is the man I'm going to be telling you all about tonight. On multiple occasions, my Poppy actually came to those presentations with me. And I wouldn't tell the students. I would say to them to ignore the elderly couple sitting in the back of the classroom. That couple was my Poppy Nat and my nanny Seal, but only I knew that. I would usually tell the students that they were friends of my family who happened to live in the neighborhood and wanted to hear the presentation. I would then share my Poppy's story with the students. And afterwards, I would say to the class, "Hey guys, I lied to you. That's actually my Poppy sitting back there." I've had some students run to him and hug him. Others opened their mouths wide in shock. Some asked if he'd show them the tattoo on his arm. It was always so rewarding for both him and for me, but especially for my Poppy. For so long, he never spoke about what he endured. Only in recent years, as I've become consumed by his story, has he started to talk more about it. And now he's actually really happy to speak about it. My Poppy just last week on the phone said to me in his thick Polish accent with a hint of Yiddish in there, which you'll hear in a moment, he said to me, "Look at you, an American girl born here in the US and so involved with keeping the stories alive." And then also just last week, my mom said to me that I should stop doing so many speeches and presentations because she thinks that I don't sleep and have too much on my plate. But my response to her was, if I don't tell Poppy's story, who will? So that's why I do it. And let me tell you his story. My papi was born as Nusen Rosenberg on March 8th, 1922, which means he is 99 years old right now, a huge milestone birthday that we just celebrated in person this month. Finally, he was vaccinated. We were able to take our masks off, and it was so nice to finally get together after such a tough year and celebrate a birthday like that. He was born in Pultusk, Poland. It's a small town, but with a big Jewish population, and it's located about an hour north of Warsaw, which is Poland's capital. My papi was one of 9 siblings when the war broke out. He had 2 other siblings who died prior to the war. He was named after his grandfather, Natan Torfstein, who died in 1921. His grandfather, Natan, who you see in this photo, was a really important man in his community. He was the chief rabbi of Stanislav, which was a city then in Poland, but is now part of the Ukraine. Natan Torfstein was revered by his family and all those who knew him. And even though my papi was born after Natan passed, his parents always talked about Natan and the incredible scholar that he was. So in the Jewish religion, many of you know that when you're named after someone, you're always named after someone after they've passed away. Also, to be named after someone, it could just be the first initial of the name. So when my papi was born less than a year after his grandpa Natan's death, my papi was named Nusen. And I always believed that being named after such a powerful figure helped my papi find the strength to survive. When the war first broke out, my papi was only 17 years old. The Nazis were invading Poland quickly, and his family knew they had to hide. They left everything in Pultusk, which sadly wasn't much. My papi's dad came from a family of rope makers, and all 9 children plus their parents lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Pultusk. They were very, very poor. When the Germans first came into Pultusk, they rounded up Jewish men with beards. They were all shot and put in a mass grave. My papi's dad, whose name was Nusen Rosenberg, was one of those men killed. My papi remembers the moment they took him. It happened so fast. His father turned around and looked at the family with terrified eyes, and that was the last time they ever saw him. After that, while you can imagine, they're trying to grieve, they're in tremendous grief, but they knew that they had to leave Pultusk. My papi, his mom, and some of his siblings that were still living home planned to escape to Warsaw, where they had some family, and it was also a bigger city, so they thought that it would be an easier place to hide. On their journey, walking to Warsaw, they spent days walking during the night and then hiding in the woods during the daylight hours. They eventually got to Warsaw after all that effort, only to be rounded up by Nazis so quickly and thrown in a ghetto right outside of the capital. In 1996, when my papi was 74, he was interviewed by Steven Spielberg's Shoah Foundation. That organization has made it its mission to get as many Holocaust survivor testimonials as possible. My papi's interview is one of about 55,000 video testimonials collected. Here's a quick clip of him talking about life in the ghetto.
People were dying. What can I say? In the subhuman condition, people were dying, and there was no medicine, no doctors, nothing. Whoever lasted, lasted. Whoever passed away, died. That's what the kind of a lifestyle in a ghetto.
Several families crammed into small apartments, barely any food, inhumane conditions. Soon after arriving at the ghetto, Germans were rounding up 1 male from each family to go to forced labor camps. My papi, who was fit and of prime age, bravely volunteered to go. When he said goodbye to his family in the ghetto, he did not know that it would be the last time he'd ever see his mother and most of his siblings again.
We kissed everybody goodbye. We never knew that if I'll ever see them back. We shot it. Then I went to the forced labor camp. It's called a town in Polish. It's by the German border. It used to call Kolmar.
You just heard him mention that forced labor camp Kolmar, which was in Germany or right by the German border. My poppy was one of just about 50 men at that camp, so it was really small. And the workers there were tasked with cleaning out the sewer systems and building roads. When my poppy was assigned to work in the sewer, a few times he'd find rotten potatoes down there. And every week or so, the German officers would make all the prisoners throw their uniforms into boiling hot water to disinfect their clothing. And this was mostly done so that the Germans who watched over them weren't infected with anything. My grandfather found a way to tie just a few pieces of those rotten potatoes into his thin uniform and then throw them into the boiling water. And that's how he got just a little bit of extra nourishment for a few weeks until a guard caught him one day.
And they put me in on a bench, stretched out, took off my pants, and they gave me about 15 or 16 flogging. And I hope I wouldn't get this anymore. And then they put on a pot of cold water and they set me in to take off the pain from the whipping. That was because I carried about 4 or 5 potatoes in my pants.
After that, my poppy was then forced to start digging his own grave to pay the consequences.
I had to go and dig that grave. I had to lay down straight if it'll fit me. And when everything is done and they lay there, fortunately it wasn't me. They brought in another guy, a Jew. He was already unconscious from beating and everything. And all of us had to come out in the front by the grave. And the German officer made a speech.
What did he say?
He said, mal ausruhen. Eure Parole ist nur Arbeit. Wenn ihr nicht Arbeit leisten kann, hat bei uns keine Werde. I mean, if you want me to translate it into English, listen to me, Jews. By us, you have to work. When you can last your work, when you can complete your work, or you can work, you have no value to us. And then became 3 Gestapo and they killed him, which they brought in that guy who was unconscious, and we buried him. Fortunately, it wasn't for me.
And you just saw my poppy smile at the end there, the grave not being for him. But I have to tell you, that smile is not fully indicative of the way he felt. He felt guilt his entire life, knowing that that day he had to build a grave for another innocent man. I also thought that clip was so incredible as my poppy recited the German commands. Obviously, this video is from 25 years ago, but I have to tell you, at 99, my poppy's memory is just as unbelievable. And there are still a lot of stories he shares with me where he remembers verbatim commands and conversations from so many decades ago. He also describes the food that he ate at Colmar, the forced labor camp.
Not the original food, everything was substitute. Like they had bread, it's done from a lot of sawwood, where they saw the sawdust. You know, there were a lot of splinters in the bread too. In other words, it wasn't pure bread, it was more wood dust from sawdust than flour. That's the way, was the bread. And the tea was leaves from trees.
After his work was complete at Colmar, my poppy was rounded up and thrown into a cattle car like an animal. For days, he was trapped inside that car, no food, no drink, no sanitary place to use the bathroom. Dozens and dozens of Jews crammed into that small car like sardines. Their destination, the infamous Auschwitz concentration camp.
We arrived, this I can tell you, we arrived in the evening. And they start yelling, screaming to get out. You know, we had such a fear. It was unbelievable, whipping and hitting. We had to take off the civilian clothes.
What did you see when you first got to Auschwitz?
We knew right away. We saw the barbed wire, and you know, we saw the gate. We're right near the gate where it said "Arbeit macht frei."
Those words he just said are Arbeit macht frei, the infamous words at the gate to Auschwitz, which you see here in this photo. The Germans, in German, that means Arbeit macht frei. It means work will set you free. Obviously, a very cruel deception for those just arriving to camp. Those words are at the gate of the main camp, which is called Auschwitz I. My poppy was then sent over to Auschwitz II, which is also called Birkenau. And at Birkenau is where the most mass murders took place. When my poppy got there, he was forever marked with a tattoo, officially becoming prisoner 143499. He was thrown in a barrack, and each morning he had to stand in line for selection, where German guards would decide who would live and who would go to the gas chambers that day. The best thing to happen to my poppy in Birkenau was reuniting with his younger brother, Moishe.
My younger brother, oh, we hugged us, we kissed each other, and he told me the sad story about my two brothers. And I asked him, you were later with my mother. I mean, when I left for the first one selected to go to forced labor camp, what happened? He says he don't know what happened with them. They took him away. He knew they took him away. So he told me all the story about them. And I didn't expect I'd be able to see any of my family again.
He had learned from Moishe that two of their older brothers, Avromo and Yitzhak, had been shot and killed for trying to escape another camp that they were in. It was very emotional for my grandfather to learn that, and to also hear that his mom and other young siblings had been murdered. No one ever heard from them again, and they are believed to have been killed in a place called Babi Yar. Babi Yar, which is incredible to me that we don't hear that much about it, was a massacre site in Ukraine where nearly 34,000 Jews were killed in just 2 days in 1941. Now, back to Birkenau, my poppy and his brother came face to face with Joseph Mengele. Mengele was the notorious Nazi doctor who not only selected who would be killed in the gas chambers, but he also was one of the people who administered the gas. He was also known for doing horrific medical experiments on young children and twins.
Mengele was selecting us to work. That's right, in Birkenau.
What do you remember about him?
But then we came with a group of Gestapo. Gestapo with he had a cane in his hand, and he pointed out this one over here, and the other soldiers with their dog. They made sure that guy who was on the left side shouldn't run to the right side. And that's what happened about for 1 week, every day on the appeal to be selected. Then, for fortunate, I was selected with my younger brother to go to work. And there was no, we knew that we wouldn't go to the gas chamber.
My poppy spent about 3 months with Moishe in Birkenau, and then he was transferred to that camp he just mentioned called Yavorshno, which was nearby, and it was one of many Auschwitz subcamps. He spent more than 2 years there doing hard labor, building electric power plants, and working in the coal mines. In Yavorshno, I'll share a clip in a moment of my poppy talking about his most horrific memory. A group of 18 prisoners had built an underground tunnel from their barracks to the nearby woods, and they were planning an escape. Someone ratted them out, and here is what happened next.
We marked at the camp. Suddenly we see all the Gestapo on the roofs with machine guns. And there was a long line with wood to hang up people with stools underneath. And the same story, that we are frightened. We thought they were going to wipe us all out. But we had to witness this. They're going to hang those 18 guys, 18 Czechs. They were mostly, Jews, a little bit, not too many Jews in Czech, because they the one who tried to escape from the barrack. And they hanged up all the 18. And of course, they made a speech, the Germans, to a loudspeaker. There were thousands of prisoners to watch the the hanging. They said, if you will ever think of this running away, or that's what will happen to you. And the prisoner, they start to yell the anthem of Czech, you know, that you can kill us, all of us. We'll remember that one will be alive. We'll remember what you did to us, which I can tell you now what happened, what I witnessed. And the Germans know about it too.
He was forced to witness the hanging of 18 men. Unbelievable. I could go on and on about the other horrors he witnessed in the camp, but I want to go now to the Death March. In 1945, in January 1945, everyone was evacuated from Auschwitz because the Russian army was advancing. Prisoners had to march for days in what eventually became known as the Death March.
We started to march. A lot of them couldn't do it, and they killed them right on the spot, and they got it. We saw anybody who couldn't walk. Right away, they were walking with the German Lugers with the guns, and right on the spot, they killed them, left alone in the garden. It was bitter cold in January, and we had to wear the wooden shoes with the snow sticking down. We couldn't even walk. You know, the legs were twisting. We walked through the night, and they killed a lot of them. A lot of them were killed because they couldn't walk. They were not physically fit to walk.
During the march, as you heard him say, it was freezing, it was snowing, and my papi suffered severe inflammation in his legs and feet, and he knew that he wouldn't be able to go on much longer. The march had also turned into complete chaos because the Germans weren't able to keep count of all the prisoners anymore. So when they all stopped to sleep overnight, because the Germans needed to sleep too, my papi and about 20 other prisoners were able to hide in a haystack. And while he was hiding, my grandpa tried to scratch off the tattoo on his arm with a rusty wire, which you can imagine did not go over very well. He then got a massive infection on his arm. At the same time, from years of not being able to brush his teeth, he had already been suffering from a tooth infection that got so severe that there was a hole in the side of his cheek. If he were to drink liquid, not that he had much access to it, the liquid would come out of the side of his face. And to this day, if you look really closely, my papi still has a small scar on his cheek. And back to the Death March, it would take me a long time to get through all the details, so I'm going to give you a very abbreviated version of what happened next. Nazis found my papi hiding a few days later, and somehow he was able to convince them that he wasn't Jewish, because there were a lot of other people hiding too, like political prisoners. And he was brought to a nearby prisoner of war camp where members of the British Brigade were imprisoned. And according to my papi, I haven't really been able to look into this much myself, but he said that there was an agreement between the Germans and the British, and that British prisoners could not be killed. So the British Brigade, which also happened to have a few Jewish soldiers and also a Jewish doctor, took my papi under their wing and they helped hide him.
They gave me a cross to carry across, so I shouldn't be noticeable. And they gave me a name. I should call myself Standish James. That was a British prisoner who died. I should carry his name. And I couldn't speak a word of English. I was with them. They cleaned me up. I had a British uniform with shoes, with a cross. I tried to show off my cross so nobody should be suspicious. And everybody asked me, how come you are a young guy? I said I was a volunteer. That's all I knew.
So he looked too young to be a soldier. So that's what he said. He said he was volunteering with the brigade. After that, the Germans made the British Brigade march out of that prisoner of war camp. And obviously there are a lot of other details in between, but I don't even know all the details myself. And while they were on that march, he and the British Brigade, they were eventually liberated by American soldiers. My papi describes his emotions when he saw the American troops.
We laid out on the street, we start kissing the soldiers, the tanks, everything. I kept on looking all the time if a German is behind me. Since 5 years, you know, being castrated into a prison camp, so I always thought maybe some Germans are still behind me.
Unbelievable. I can't imagine just constantly looking over my shoulder. And that's what he did for so long. He just always felt like he was being followed by someone. So after that, my grandpa, he went a lot of places, but he finally made his way to England with help from the British Brigade. And he was put in an orphanage there and soon adopted by a Jewish British family named the Leaf family. The father of the family, named Ernie Leaf, treated my poppy like his own son. He used to give him cash to go out at night and always a good meal and a roof over his head. And here's a photo you see of my poppy posing with Mr. Leaf's car, wearing a suit that was donated to him. Mr. Leaf had a son named Wally, who was my poppy's age. The top left corner, that's Poppy and Wally together. Wally has now passed away, but my poppy stayed in touch with Wally for decades. And now my family is still in touch with Wally's son and grandkids. We've seen them so many times over the years. They even came here for my bat mitzvah in year 2000, and we've seen them several times since. The Leafs will always be like family to us, and they saved my poppy in so many ways. After everything he endured, to this day, my poppy never complains, ever, and he never asks, why me? He also has never lost his faith in God.
It's more than a miracle. It's more than a miracle how I survived.
Did you pray to God at all during these years?
Well, yes, I still I'm not strictly Orthodox, but I pray with tefillin every day. You know, I don't pray, I don't skip it. When I go for vacation, I take it with me. I have no, I know whether to tell you about that, but I am considered lucky by living a life like this, losing my family. But it's very terrible. I don't consider it to be lucky. I want to give my testimony. People shouldn't think when I pass away, how long could they survive it? Another 10 years, there will be no one alive. So I want to tell the truth, how I went through in life. The people shouldn't think that nothing never happened. Because a lot of people denying it. That never happened. They're making up stories. The Jew feels pity. They should know that I'm alive. I can tell some stories. A part of it, not the story is not everything. A part of it, what I've been through.
Ever since a young age, I've always been very aware of the fact that my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor, but it wasn't really until the past 10 years or so that it became my mission to learn as much as possible. In 2018, I traveled to Poland with a small video camera so that I could document my journey. I joined March of the Living, which is an annual march from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz II. About 10,000 people from all over the world join the march each year on Yom HaShoah, which many of you know is another name for Holocaust Remembrance Day. I joined a group of young professionals based out of LA and toured around Poland with them for 9 days. I spent that week visiting death camps, mass graves, and ghettos. On my last day in Poland, I went to my poppy's hometown of Pultusk, to the street where he grew up. His apartment building was no longer there. I also went to the city's town hall, and with remarkable luck, though sadly I had to do some bribing, I actually had to buy these fancy gourmet chocolates for the people working at the town hall in order to get them to help me, which you guys can ask me about later. But that was something that my guide for the day had told me that I had to do. So after I gave them the chocolates, I gave them some hours to do some research. And when I came back, they found my poppy's original birth certificate, as well as the birth certificates for 4 of his siblings, Gittel, Rivka, Chava, and Aaron. I had given them a whole list of names. They weren't able to find everyone, but they were able to find those. It was beyond emotional to touch the ink, and I was surprised that they even let me do it, but I got to touch the ink, smell the ink, touch and see my great-grandfather Nusen Rosenberg's original signature. I also went back to Warsaw on that last day before I flew home, to one of the world's largest Jewish cemeteries, where a cemetery manager helped me find my great-great-grandfather's tombstone. This is the stone of Natan Torfstein, the man who I mentioned earlier was the chief rabbi of Stanislavov. The stone is in Hebrew and says that he was the chief rabbi who died in Sukkot or during Sukkot in 1921. There are also, I don't know if you can see at the very top, there's books etched into the top of the stone that signify that he was a great scholar. I created 3 short films on my journey for Fox 5. Last year, one of them won an Emmy Award and another received an Emmy nomination. It was always my dream to bring my poppy to the Emmy Awards ceremony with me, but unfortunately that was not able to happen last year since, because of COVID, the ceremony was virtual. All right, I'm going to speak really slowly now because this part I always get really emotional. Before I wrap up, I wanted to share an incredible story. 2 years ago on Yom HaShoah, I spoke at a 3GNY event on the Lower East Side. I always cry. My poppy was there, and I was a few months from giving birth to my daughter, Maya, who's now 20 months old, and that's a recent photo of her. I'm going to take a break. I can drink for a second. So coincidentally, Maya is also the name of my street, of the street that my poppy grew up on in Pultusk, which absolutely did not cross my mind at all when we chose that name. It was something that I realized later. But you can see it says Maya, M-A-J-A. The J is pronounced like a Y in Polish. So during my speech that night on Yom HaShoah, I surprised my poppy who was sitting in the audience, and I told him, I was rehearsing last night, I said, I'm not gonna cry. I told him that one of the Hebrew names that I was going to give Maya was gonna be after his younger brother, Aaron. And Aaron was only 7 years old when he was believed to have been killed in Babi Yar, which is the mass killing site that I mentioned earlier. And Aaron has an amazing story. He's remembered for sneaking out of a hole in the ghetto fence late at night and finding scraps of food on the street, and then coming back into the ghetto and feeding his family with the scraps of food that he found. So absolute bravery at such a young age. You'd think that I'm on TV every day that I could stay composed, but never when I talk about him. So when Maya was born, one of the Hebrew names that we gave her was Arona, after Aaron. And you could see his birth certificate, it actually also says Arona for some reason, but my poppy said he was known as Aaron. Also, Maya has another Hebrew name, which is Yehudi, and that's after my husband's maternal grandma. So this is where the story gets crazy. Weeks after Maya was born, I went to my grandparents and we decided to pull up Aaron's birth certificate. And I had gotten it translated to English about 2 years ago, and I hadn't looked at it in nearly 2 years. And I started shaking when I read it. It said that Aaron was born on July 27th, 1932. Maya was born on July 27th, 2019. Now, her due date was actually supposed to be August 9th. So I think she came early because she wanted to share that special birthday with her namesake. So to me, that was a sign that that little boy's spirit is living on inside her, and that my murdered ancestors are sending a signal that they're watching over all of us. I'm so proud. Thank you. I can't even talk anymore. So that's all I have for tonight. Thanks, guys. I'll stop sharing.
Dana, thank you so much for gifting us with your family story.
Of course.
I speak for myself and probably a lot of other people out there that you are not the only one getting emotional hearing about your daughter and the connection that you have. We are now going to open it up for questions. So anyone out there, if you have questions for Dana, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And due to the high volume of questions we typically receive, we may not be able to answer every single one. So if your question is not addressed tonight, please feel free to email info@3gnewyork.org. We'll put that in the chat. and we will relay that to Dana. Thank you for understanding. Dana, the first question, there are actually several questions that have come in. People are really curious about Poppy's younger brother, Moishe, and if he made it out alive, or if you know anything more about what happened to him.
Yeah, so my Poppy, I'm composed now, I think. My Poppy was one of 4 siblings to survive out of 9, which is a pretty good statistic, sadly. So he survived, Moishe survived, Simcha survived, and Rivka survived. So after the war, he didn't find out, and I could be wrong. I'm gonna have my mom text me if I'm missing anything. So I'll look at my phone. I know more than anyone in my family about his Holocaust story, and they know more about what happened afterward. So Moishe, Simcha, and Rivka all went to Israel, all randomly. No one knew where anyone was. And I believe there were special articles going around in newspapers where people could submit their name, where they were living, their phone numbers, and say, I'm a survivor. I'm looking for family members who from the Rosenberg family from Pultusk, Poland. And that's how there was this network of newspaper clippings going around, and that's how people connected. And I'll see if my mom texts me if that's right, but I believe that's how they connected, through these newspaper clippings, and someone knew someone who knew someone who connected them. So he had found out that 3 of his siblings were still alive, and they were all in Israel, and then they obviously all connected there. And one of them, Rivka, wound up moving to the US eventually. So Moishe and Sim, they all had kids, and so they're all my mom's first cousins, and then their first cousins' kids all had kids, and they are all seriously like brothers and sisters to me. Well, I shouldn't say all of them, a lot of them, they're in Israel, so it's not always hard to keep in touch, but one group of Rosenbergs in Israel, I talk to them literally every other day. We're on Facebook Messenger, we're FaceTiming, they come for weddings here. Those are Simcha's kids. And then Moishe's son, Jacob, who passed away recently at a young age. He was very special, and he was our connection to Moishe. And I know that he's also looking down on us today. And I know that Jacob's wife, Julie, is also watching. And I know that Julie knows that Moishe was so incredibly important to my Poppy. And I think the 2 of them knowing that they were there, that knowing that they were survivors, helped them get through the rest of the war. And they did meet up on the death march, by the way. That's a whole nother story to get into, but they had been separated when he went to Jaworzno, and then they met up on the death march, and Moishe was really having trouble walking, and he urged my Poppy to keep going, and my Poppy left him with other people, and he didn't know if he ever survived or not, and he did. So that was an amazing, and they also look like twins, by the way. Also, my Poppy is the last one alive of his 9 siblings.
Well, I will tell you that we are getting many comments about how you have made everyone else very emotional. So don't feel bad. We're all feeling, you're really bringing your grandfather Poppy's story to all of us in a really real way. So thank you. And another question that we have is, even though only 4 of the siblings survived, you seem to have photos, black and white photos of those who did not survive. And so we're wondering how those came about.
Yes, actually, that's a great question, because most people whose families were wiped out and went to the camp had really had no photographs or documents whatsoever. Their homes were burned or taken over. My Poppy was holding on to one picture of his father, I believe. I could be wrong. I think it was his mom or father that he had lost in the shower at Auschwitz, or got ruined. And that was the last picture he had. Fortunately, my Poppy's mother was named Sarah. Sarah had a sister named Devorah, who ran off to Argentina with a boyfriend right before the war. Now that was a really badass thing to do back then, for a woman to run off with a boyfriend to Argentina. But it was pretty amazing. She did that before the war, before she really knew what was going to happen. And they sent over pictures. They stayed in touch with Devorah, and they had sent her pictures over the years. They sent her that big picture of Natan Torstein, the chief rabbi. They sent pictures of the siblings. And Devora, being in Argentina where she wasn't affected, she held on to those pictures all those years and was able to give them to my grandpa. So that was the only way we were able to get pictures. Had Devora stayed in Poland, we would not have any pictures whatsoever. Also another story, my grandpa had never seen a picture of his mother, and a historian for like Devora's family reached out to me over the summer, and she sent me that picture of Sarah. So my poppy just saw a picture of his mom for the first time this past summer since the 1940s. And if you guys follow me on social media, I actually posted that video of him. He knew that I had the picture and he didn't know when I was going to give it to him. And I recorded giving it to him for the first time. And it was pretty amazing.
That is an incredible story.
Yeah.
We have another question about if Poppy was always so open in speaking with you about his story, and if he ever had a chance to return to Eastern Europe.
So those are both great questions. I wish I could give a better answer because at a young age, I didn't ask that much. He was always, I do remember always sitting on his lap when I was in middle school, and he would hold out his arm and have me read the numbers, 143499. And that was probably one of the first set of digits I ever had memorized. So even though I didn't ask those like tough questions the way I do now, he did always, it was something that was always known and always spoken about. And as I got older, he never didn't want to talk about it. My mom always says, stop, give him a break. It's too much for him. But I'm always like, Mom, he survived the Holocaust. He can survive answering some questions, because if I don't share these stories, we're never going to know. So he was always been open, and he tells me now, like, call with any question I have. He's really great about answering questions. And yes, he never wanted to go back to Poland ever. He said he would never go. But my Uncle Jay, who's my mom's brother, did take him, I don't know the exact year, but it was after 1996. It was after that interview. And I know he was really, really reluctant to go, but he did it for my uncle because, you know, my uncle's his son and he really wanted to connect and learn more. And I don't think he regretted going. I think it was a really, really difficult experience. But I think he went on a tour bus and everyone there treated him really like a celebrity. And I think it was really special for him to kind of get that attention and to have people hear his story about what he went through. So overall, I do think it was a good experience for him, but it was definitely tough. And he's only been back there once.
Great. We have a question from, I think, a friend of yours. And they're wondering, after everything he went through, when he ultimately came to America, kind of what did he do? And did he have any challenges acclimating to life here? You also mentioned there was a sweet old woman in the back of the classroom. So we'd also, I think, want to hear how he met his wife.
Yes, wait, sorry, tell me again the first part of the question.
Just after moving to America, what did he do? And did he have any trouble acclimating after his experience?
So after England, a great aunt of his, I just called my mom earlier to see who exactly the aunt was, like the exact connection. She thinks she was like a great aunt or a great aunt. So I don't have those exact details, but a great aunt connected with him who was living in Canada, who got papers for him to go to Canada. And then from Canada, he was able, a few years, he worked, actually, I wrote this down. I didn't know this until tonight. He worked as a diamond polisher, according to my mom, in Canada. And then from there, he got papers to come to New York because he always wanted to come here. And he was living in the Bronx. And I believe he took some classes at FIT because he heard that there was a lot of demand in the garment district. And he got a job. His career was making women's and girls' clothing. And he didn't make much money. They were a very middle class family, but it was enough to keep them afloat. But my mom had the most beautiful dresses growing up. When she was in elementary school, she was known to go in with ball gowns every day because my poppy was making these beautiful dresses. But he and my grandma met on Orchard Beach in the Bronx, which was the cool Jewish hangout to go back then. And it's funny, my nanny Seal, she's an amazing woman too. And, to be married to a Holocaust survivor is not easy. to deal with that suffering and to witness. I feel like she's a first-hand witness too. She knows every single story. Usually when I have a question, I go to her because my Poppy's accent's so thick and I understand her better. But she knows everything and she's an amazing woman. But she jokes around that she always liked really tall men and my Poppy is not so tall. And she was like, I made an exception for him. I don't usually go out with short guys, but he was so handsome. And he swept her off her feet on the beach in Orchard Beach in the Bronx. And they were married 2 months later. And then about 10 months after that, they had my mom. So they moved quite quickly and they've been married. They're still both alive today. They've been married, 60 something years, which is unbelievable. They're driving each other crazy during COVID, trapped in their apartment together, like really. But overall, they're very happy.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So we have another question. Thanking you for sharing about the story with your daughter. And you talked a lot about how you respond and what you think about that connection. But a question about what Poppy's reaction was when he found out that you were going to name Maya after Aaron. And then especially when he realized that they shared the same birthday.
So he was actually at the service. So nobody knew. My husband was the only one that knew. And we didn't know if we were having a boy or girl. So the Hebrew name, one of them was either going to be Aaron or Arona. And I said it out loud. And then after I went up to him and I was like, Poppy, did you hear what I said? And he just had like he's a man of very few words. I know you just heard an interview with him, but he's not the type of person that speaks unless you like really pull and ask questions from him. He's never been like a woe is me. He's never been let me tell my tale. So he doesn't express or exude much emotion, but he just had the biggest smile on his face and he was like nodding like, and then I could tell you I remember it so clearly. Maya was, I don't know, maybe 8 weeks old or so. And we were in my grandparents' apartment in Bayside. And I was sitting at this small table in the kitchen. It was me, my mom, and my grandpa, and my grandma. And we're talking about Aaron. I was like, oh, let me pull up the birth certificate. It's been so long. My mom was in the other room sitting on the couch. And I pull it up and I'm not kidding. I started shaking and then bawling hysterically. Like you guys thought I got emotional tonight, like bawling. And my mom was running over. Like she thought I was having a medical condition, like something was wrong. And she's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I'm like, look at this picture. And she's like, what? I'm like, look at the birth date. And then she realized my Poppy started crying. And that was actually the first time I'd seen my Poppy cry in a really long time. I was just in shock. I was in complete, and I don't know why I never thought to look at his birth certificate sooner than that. But it was just, I mean, if that's not a sign that there's something more in this life, I don't know what is. It was just amazing.
How does your family history and the importance of telling your Poppy's story kind of fuel your desire and your passion as a journalist? And several people want to know if and how they can see the films that you've made.
That's a great question. I don't know if my history has anything to do with me like becoming a reporter. It's I've just always been like, I have a Jewish mom, just like all of you, who like badgers me with questions all the time. So I naturally like badger everyone else with questions. I've just always been like really inquisitive. And I wanted to become a reporter in college after I had an internship with NBC. And I just thought it was so amazing to every day wake up and meet new people and go to new places and be an expert on a new topic every day. So I wouldn't say that my history had anything to do with being a reporter, but now that I am a reporter, you know, the curiosity, I think that skill set is something that plays a huge role in my job and plays a huge role in what I do with my Holocaust love, you know, with all the research and that I've had to do, all the questions that I've had to ask. And I think my role as a reporter definitely made me a stronger researcher in this sense, and made me kind of like tug and ask the tough questions. But the opportunity to go to Poland was something that I was going to go regardless. I asked my boss if I could take time off to document my journey. And I knew that I knew that we were probably going to start a family soon, and I didn't think that there was any other time to go. I also didn't want my husband to go with me. I felt like it's something I needed to do on my own, and I just didn't want to lose focus. I also knew that he'd be trying to help me the whole time and carry my equipment, and I wouldn't have wanted to take that away from him. I didn't want to compromise and feel like I was slowing someone down. I just something needed to do on my own time. So I went and I told my boss that if there was any chance that I could take one of their cameras, because it's much better quality, but I would have bought my own. But if they would let me do something for Fox 5, and I'm really lucky that my boss is a huge history buff and he's visited camps himself, and he was so supportive of it. And not only did they let me do one film, it turned into 3 films. And it was just, I had that video camera in my hand, I'm not kidding, every second that I was there. And everyone on my trip, there were 40 of us, and everyone was always offering to carry my tripod or to do interviews with me. And they were just so supportive. And then I got back, and Fox 5 gave me really months to work, and I got days just to write, days to, sit with the editor, days to review all the video. So, I mean, I can't think of any other local news station, like a New York tri-state area station, that not only would have let one of these stories air, but 3 of them. So no matter where I end up in my career, I will always be grateful that Fox gave me this opportunity, because I can't imagine that happening anywhere else. Where you can see it, I have a website. It's just like a random Weebly website where you create your own, but I have all my Holocaust stories there. But if you just type in Fox 5, if you go to my social media pages, Dana Arschin, you should be able to find links, but you can also send me a private message to any of my pages, and I'll make sure to show you the links. But my page is danaarshin.weebly.com. Not very creative.
Well, thank you so much, Dana. And we will make sure to include that website address in follow-up email that we send tomorrow to all participants from tonight. And really, Dana, thank you so much for sharing such a moving story, sharing so much of yourself tonight. And Allison, thank you as well for being part of our program. And thanks to all of you out there for joining us. We're really glad you took the time to hear Dana speak words that must never be forgotten. If you haven't yet made a gift to support our educational programs, we hope you'll consider making one now. You can refer to the chat for ways that you can donate, and thank you. Also, if you have connections with educators who may want our speakers to present to their classes, please let us know. We have a large speakers bureau of grandchildren prepared and ready to present, just like you saw Dana do tonight. And if you are a 3G yourself and interested in learning to tell your grandparents' story, our next WEDU class begins on Monday, April 12th. Keep an eye out on your email in the next few days for more details and how to sign up. We hope to see you all again soon. Next week on Thursday, April 8th, 3GNY will partner with American Society for Yad Vashem and Liberation 75 for a really special Yom HaShoah program. It will feature Holocaust survivor Hedy Baum and reflections from grandchildren of survivors. And Wednesday, April 21st is our next WEDU Wednesday, where Dan Riff will share his grandfather's story. Maris Riff grew up in Auschwitz, better known in German as Auschwitz. After the Nazis invaded, Maris, along with other local Jews, was forced into preparing the site to become a concentration camp. We'll be sending out an email tomorrow with details for these events and others, as well as a recording of tonight's program. You can also check out our past WEDU Wednesday speakers and other events on 3GNY's YouTube channel. Thank you again for taking the time out of your evening to be with us. We are grateful, as always, for your presence and support. Enjoy the rest of your Passover, and happy Easter to all who are celebrating.